Welcome back, everybody. I'm Craig Andrus. It is time for Call the Mayor Wichita, 316-491-5787. You can ask any question you'd like. We'll try and answer it. And joining me now is not Wichita Mayor-elect, but now Wichita Mayor Brandon Whipple. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Craig. This is great.
I appreciate you being here. Look, seriously, you can ask pretty much anything you'd like. And I know a lot of people have questions. They got questions about Century 2. They got questions about the layoffs. They got questions about, well, I don't know, the weather. Somebody always seems to ask about the weather or the streets and how city crews respond to that. Call the mayor, 316-491-5787. That is the number to call. I guess we'll just start in the way of introduction for those of you who don't know Brandon yet. Tell us a little bit about yourself. You've been a lawmaker. You're very plugged into Wichita. You have been for some time now.
Yeah, I guess the brief story is the last 7 years I served in the Kansas legislature for the 96th district, which is South Wichita. We ran for mayor this last election. This summer was pretty much all campaigning. And we had this kind of strange 2 months off where once I was elected, I wasn't sworn in until about 3 weeks ago, until the new year. And yeah, just trying to figure out the ins and outs of City Hall right now, while also staying connected to the community and moving forward with our agenda.
Now, the swearing in, tell me about that. That was a fun event. I want to say it seemed like it was a fun event. Tell me a little bit about that. That was a first for you, obviously. You've been sworn into Topeka before, but this is something new.
So the official swearing in was at City Hall, and it was a fun event. But I'll tell you, my 2-year-old, we brought my kids, and I have a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And in Topeka, I taught them that when the House isn't in session and we have all those desks, they can actually run around and hide. So now when they see any type of theater-looking arrangement with the seats, they start running around and getting a little crazy. So it was great to be sworn in and have my family there, but my 2-year-old, it was tough to tell him that during the opening prayer, it was time to sit down and be quiet, and instead he ran around. I addressed it too, where it was, I said, I would apologize, but really it's probably going to happen again. I'm a pretty active dad, and I'm sure we'll bring the kids back there, and they'll be on their best behavior for probably about 5 minutes.
Sure, as kids will do, right. Especially that age. So I know you talked about this to me during the campaign, but explain to Wichita a little bit about trying to juggle schedules, going to sleep, and then getting up at the same time, because for those of you who have kids, small, younger kids, or if you used to have small kids, of course, you know the drill. Try and get your kids to go to bed. It's 9:30, they're not asleep. It's 10:30, they're not asleep. How do you juggle these things and then try and be bright and sharp the next morning? It's been a challenge, of course.
So I drink a lot of coffee, and that allows me, like every other parent, to kind of fake it. But overall, really, one of the things I want to do, and I did this as a legislator, is normalize parenting. The way our economy is right now, most people of my generation and those following, both parents have a career. And a lot of times, and we talked about this on the campaign, where my wife works full-time for our church, and I would drive and we would switch cars at the church, which is kind of our center of where the kids go to school, where I would have to go to meetings, and then we'd switch cars and I'd go pick up the kids and she'd drop them off. So it's really just kind of doing that dance that a lot of other parents seem to be doing as well. Moving forward with it, I'm not afraid to bring the kids and have them be a little crazy if need be. We try not to too much. They don't. You learn to do work even when even when they're trying to punch the keys on the laptop. But they were actually very sick this last week. So
sorry to hear that.
Yeah, nothing. So they sleep in our bed, and nothing makes you question how big a 6-year-old really is until they're kicking you in the back and
True.
Elbowing you and while they're sleeping. So
I can identify with that well. And the computer, trying to do things with the keyboard. You move the laptop, they come back again. You move it, they come back again.
It's almost like they know what they're doing too. Where it's like, this isn't fun. This is a Word doc or an email.
Yeah.
Why don't you go play with?
Doesn't always work. They want to be around dad.
That's right.
Just do. And mom too. 316-491-5787. That's the number. Call the mayor of Wichita. You can ask about anything you'd like. You can ask about the priorities. We've got some access info from Wichita. You can check that out too. You can also look at the legislative priorities. Let's talk about legislative priorities. You spent 6 years. Did I get that right? 6 years, right?
7 years.
7 years, thank you. So legislative priorities 2020 for the city of Wichita, we got this up. Workforce development, that seems to be a key because we've had so many positions that needed to be filled. We've had some issues now with the Max 37. So workforce development, probably going to be a big deal right now as well as economic development.
Yeah, definitely. So as far as the legislative agenda, this was actually set before I was sworn in, but I'm pretty happy it came out the way it did because it gives us plenty of room to kind of navigate with the changing climate of Topeka, which means, workforce development isn't just linked to like one bill or one idea. It's more broad. True. And one of the things that we're experiencing here in Wichita and really in most of the economies like ours is diversification and trying to keep our young people here. So when we see sectors that are being impacted, like let's say our aerospace sector is, there will be some people who will go find another interest, and we need to make sure that the credential they earned that got them their job in the aircraft industry is something they can build upon to help them become more marketable for another industry. I think statistically, it's said that those who are entering the workforce today will have about like 5 to 6 careers. And these aren't just jobs.
Close to 6, yes.
Yeah, and these aren't just jobs. It's not like
changes.
Yeah, it's not like me when my first job is I made pizza dough at a pizza shop, right? And then moved on to fast food, then moved on to something else. These are full-on careers. Well, how do we prepare our labor force for those type of changes? We have some incredible gems here in higher education here in Wichita. WSU Tech, for example, with Wichita State University, although they have this relationship that's unique, where WSU Tech can be very nimble and they can actually create credentials based on what the market wants. But then WSU, Wichita State, has I think it's a Bachelor's of Applied Science, which makes it, I think, in leadership and innovation, which means if you have this 2-year degree that's in a tech field, you can actually transition to this 4-year degree without having to start from scratch. So we have a lot of really innovative programs that are being offered at all levels, from the certificate level all the way up to the master's degree level here in Wichita, that I think is going to allow us to be much better prepared for our citizens who are changing careers.
And we will see some transition now. I've talked to a lot of people who work at Spirit, and some of them are questioning whether or not to move, but most of them are deciding, hey, I'm going to stay, and they're going to look into that. Let's get to our first caller. Call the mayor, Wichita, 316-491-5787. John, you are on the show. Welcome. What is your question for the mayor?
Yes, I've been receiving food stamps, only make $9,000 a year, and my food stamps went from $147 a month to $16 a month.
Oh my. Okay.
And I was just wondering if there was any recourse, people I could get in touch with, help with, because I make way below poverty.
Of course. So, unless there was, and I'd have to ask more questions about the situation to really get a better understanding. The legislature just got, so this is a state issue. When you have food stamps, you're talking about a state issue. The legislature just came into this session. I don't think there's been any major changes. So I'd recommend the caller, if the law that is still in place that allowed him to get one amount of money in food stamps has changed, then it might be something with a caseworker. My goal, what I would tell you is to start with a case manager, and then start with the department. From my understanding, and I'm on the local level now, so I'm really not up in Topeka, but I don't think that there's been any big change as far as the law goes that would justify that. So perhaps it's something that you would want to talk to someone who works in one of the departments to see if there was a mistake being made.
Indeed, John, and tell you right now, you're probably going to be in for some phone calls and some lengthy phone calls, so if you get a headset on your phone, use it. Seriously, it might be a while because once you start winding through the system, sometimes you get put on hold, and it takes a while to find the right person. So keep after it. If there's been a change there, and you're correct so far, because I do follow these legislative things, you know that I do. But there hasn't been a change yet this year. So definitely get a hold of a caseworker. I know that can be a challenge sometimes because they don't have an overabundance of caseworkers working these things, but you will need to get on the phone and make some of those phone calls. As far as the city goes, I know we have a lot of things. John, I don't know if this is an option for you. Of course, there's Lord's Diner where anybody can go. Again, that's transportation for you to get there, to get that free meal. And I understand if you make less than $9,000 a year, that can be a pretty big challenge. But Wichita does have some services available. Encourage you to get on the phone and talk to, first of all, as you said, one of your caseworkers, and secondly, then maybe you contact a lawmaker to see if there are any changes on the way.
And usually I tell people, as a state representative, pretty much one of our only superpowers is that when someone calls us and we call a department, they'll call us back. So if you are calling a department to try to figure out if there's been a change, or maybe if you need to fill out some more paperwork, if you're not getting any calls back, reach out to a elected state representative or state senator and ask for help, and be clear that maybe you're just looking to be pointed in the right direction, not asking them to change the law, because that wouldn't go into effect until this summer. But usually state representatives and state senators, one of the things that we can do really well is making calls up to a department somewhere and making sure that they do call you back. So if you're having problems with that, reach out to your elected official, and I'm sure they'll be more than happy to help.
Thank you very much. Hope that gets you some help. I like it that you said one of your superpowers. I like the sound of that. 316-491-5787. That's your number. Call the Mayor of Wichita. Let's get some more calls now. Shirley, welcome, Shirley. You're on the show. What is your question for the mayor?
Shirley.
Well, I had occasion to drive on Broadway a few days ago off of Douglas north to 21st. Hadn't driven that way in a while, and I was just amazed at what rotten shape all 4 lanes of that street is. And for being the main hub in the downtown area, I wondered if there's any plan to resurface that street.
Appreciate the question. I know that obviously straight maintenance, if you find a specific pothole, you can call it in and the city will get on that, and sometimes they'll get on it that day or the next day. So Public Works is pretty plugged into that. As far as extending things out to do an overlay, I haven't seen a plan, and maybe you have, but I haven't seen a plan yet to do that in that specific location you're talking about. But it's something that can be brought up, certainly with the meetings that people have with all of their constituents. I know every single one of the councilmen and women, they're pretty plugged in, and they do listen to these things.
And really, probably one of the best things you want to do is, it sounds like the area roughly might be in either Brandon Johnson's district or Cindy Claycomb's district. The best thing to do is reach out to your city council person. They will know the ins and outs on any of the work that's happening within their districts. As mayor, we're more, I think, a global perspective, where our goal would be to get you in touch with the right department to report if there's any problems, and usually that department can tell you about the master plan, or if a street or an area is about to get resurfaced. And
2, the more plugged in you are to talking to your city council members, I don't want to say squeaky wheel gets heard all the time, but master plans can be added to or potentially changed as well. 316-491-5787. That's the number for Call the Mayor Wichita with Brandon. Glad you're on the show. Thanks for being here.
It's good to be here.
Love it. Cindy, you have a question for the mayor. Excuse me, Christy, wrong person. Christy, you are now on the show. What is your question, Christy?
Hi, Christy.
Yeah, first I would like to congratulate Mayor Whipple.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that.
And I would like to ask a question regarding my grandsons that go here to a school called Earhart, which is an environmental school in our city. And I would like to know what your policies will entail as far as recycling and reusing for our city. And also, I would really like to know how you feel about climate change and if the weather patterns in Kansas are attributed to that, or some policies that you may have in the future. And I thank you for your time. I really respect you and appreciate your opinion.
Of course, thanks for the questions. Seem about 2 to 3 part questions. So
Yes.
if I need to
Circle
get off
back,
on,
yeah.
if I need to circle back, let me know.
I will remind you, yes.
First off, if your, I think it was your son, is at
Grandson, yes.
is at a school that is focusing on environmental policy, I think that's amazing. We need to be doing more to make sure that the next generation is prepared to take on some of these problems that I think are going to last much longer than my generation. And we got to make sure that we focus on some of the good stuff we've been doing here in Wichita when it comes to environmental policy, and then looking at what we can do better. Wichita right now has some of the cleanest air in the country. We actually don't have as much problems when it comes to air pollution as other cities our size. So we want to maintain that while also looking into ways in which we could be forward-thinking on reducing waste. One of the things I'm going to do next week is appoint a task force or a council to look in ways that we can start phasing out plastic bags in certain areas. I think Dillon's has a plan to actually phase out non-reusable plastic bags, which, as most of us know, don't really biodegrade and wind up when they're out in the streets or just not disposed of properly. They actually increase mosquitoes. Because they'll retain a little bit of water and it'll increase mosquitoes, which causes more health problems. So there are policies that other cities have been looking at to take on something such as plastic bags, and we're going to start a task force to figure out what's the best way for Wichita to take that first step forward. As far as climate change goes and other smart policies to try to combat climate change, I usually follow the science. I read studies. I do believe that that our behavior and our policies here locally and as a country can affect our climate around us, and we have a responsibility to make sure that we are as responsible as possible by utilizing recycling policies and also helping our environment.
I do know that the city keeps close tabs on the air quality for sure. They've got devices set out and they do closely watch that. So sometimes we do get air quality alerts to let people know that we're having those days. 316-491-5787. I think you did a great job of answering pretty much all that.
I think so. I mean,
yeah.
it was a long question. I mean,
was
we
long.
got some great people here in Wichita who have really thoughtful questions. So
Passionate. I'm glad they brought up Earhart because there are some really plugged in teachers that are very passionate. 316-491-5787. Jesse, you are on the show. What is your question for the mayor? Are you there?
Jesse, you there?
Okay, well, 316-491-5787. That opens one up. Well, with the city council members, you said that you're going to appoint a task force. Will the city council members also be talking about this when they go talk to their people? Because city council members are out at night. They often go to events for their own district.
Right.
Will they be plugged into this, or will I have a city council person in charge of this, or what are your thoughts there?
So actually, this started happening before I was brought on. I'm now just the new mayor, so I get to make it official and appoint it. But Brandon Johnson is the front person on this.
Okay.
He's a council member from District 1, and he is the person who has been interacting with our activists, but also members of our business community and with people from academia who have been interested in this. And I think there's about 10 or 11 people who are interested in being assigned to this council, I think is the actual word for it. Not exactly. Sometimes I call it committee. That's the legislature in me.
Yes.
But it's going to be a group who's going to come together and try to figure out how to take that first step forward.
Very nice. All right, 316-491-5787. Call the mayor. It's the first show with Brandon Whipple. Cindy, welcome to the program. Cindy, what is your question for the mayor?
Yes, thank you for taking my question. My question, as you are aware, Mayor, LW Clap Golf Course was closed last August. Despite the majority of the community community wanting to retain the park as a golf course. What are the chances of reopening our historic municipal course?
So I followed that pretty closely during the campaign, and being a Southsider, anytime South Wichita has a destination attraction, we usually want to do everything we can to keep it. So that decision to close it was made before I took office. Right now, I have allies who follow golf policy and our parks and recs pretty closely, and I think that there's a lot to do when it comes to stabilizing some of our amenities here in Wichita. For example, if we look at what other cities are doing to make sure that their golf courses are secure financially and successful for the future, I think there's a lot we can learn from Lincoln, Nebraska, which has the similar size budget and similar golf courses or amount, but they're actually making a profit off theirs. I'm not sure if we can turn back time when it comes to Clap Golf Course. It's something that we have to think about as we move forward as a council, and also working in conjunction with both the people who are in that community to make sure that whatever comes after is something that's acceptable and utilized by the community. But right now, even my friends who have been supportive of Clap Golf Course, I think their policy discussions I have with them has shifted more to make sure that the rest of golf is safe and successful for the future of Wichita. So I'm not sure if we can really turn back time on that, but I do know that whatever happens in that area, it needs to be great. It needs to be a destination attraction, and I'm hoping that we open up those conversations to the public, particularly within that area, to make sure that we follow through.
Councilmember Clendenin, if you're watching the show, call in. I know you have some thoughts about that. I know you've been pretty plugged into people that have been on both sides of the issue. So 316-491-5787. If you happen to be watching, James Clendenin, give us Cindy Claycomb, you can call us too. That's fine. Love to hear from either one of you. But it is the show for you, so you can ask whatever you want. 316-491-5787. I did get a question. Well, I got 4 questions on Facebook this week. The first one came in, of course, was about Century 2. The question comes up, what happens with Century 2 right now? What happens with Century 2 5 years from now? Will it still be here? And again, the public interest in Century 2 has, it's been vast, let me put it that way. And there is a plan moving forward that does not recommend keeping Century 2.
So, and I want to clear up some of this, where the plan moving forward is a proposal. Not until it's voted on by the council is it really a plan in action. Now, it's a good plan as far as, it's legitimate. It has some very good research behind it, and some of the bigger players within our community are out there supporting it, including some of our council members. The big thing is, though, it's probably at least a 10-year plan. So once it gets through the council, if there are no changes to it as is, then the first step is going to be, okay, what's phase 1 look like? Phase 1, I think will likely go to a vote. I think that it's going to need a vote of the people, and also probably be able to pay for itself through a sales tax. If that happens, then that first phase, and I'm just guessing right now because we haven't voted on anything, should probably be something like a state-of-the-art performing arts center with some green space. It'll probably be that first step towards implementing that plan. I don't think at this point touching Century 2 would be the best thing to do as that first step, because the organizations that utilize Century 2, they would need a place to go in the meantime. And the worst thing that could happen, I think everyone agrees with this, is if those organizations that are nonprofits that actually have performing arts, if those go dark for a few years, a lot of times that's it for them. A lot of times donations stop coming in, membership lacks, and so it makes a lot of sense, at least in my mind, to have that first section be or that first phase be the Performing Arts Center, which I think would extend Century 2 out the decision on that for a few years and allow us to have a real discussion as a community of if we are going to keep Century 2, what do we want to do with it? What is the best usage of it? And if not, talk about that going forward as well.
All right, 316-491-5787. Let me ask you the ancillary question because all three of my four questions that came in, and I'll go ahead and ask this one too. Mm-hmm. With Century 2, if you believe it comes up to a public vote, what should the public vote be? What would the public be voting on for? Would they be voting to save it? Would they be voting to change it? Your thoughts there. I'll let you answer that.
So, okay, there's a few things going on where there's a petition right now out there asking to vote to save it. That right now has not gained the signatures required. It probably will. They're pretty organized, but we're not sure if that's coming up for a vote yet. However, the other part of it is voting on the plan. Like, is this a plan that we vote on to move forward with? And that's that 10-year plan of revitalizing our river front. I'll tell you, really the voting part is going to be how do we pay for it, and do we move forward with what I think is going to be phase one. If we kind of take a lesson for how Oklahoma has done this before, usually you see confidence build every time they put something up for a public vote. So I think that first phase we'll be voting on. What we probably will vote on is that first step to the master plan. I don't think that first vote is going to be about saving Century 2 or have much to do with Century 2 unless the other organized group is able to come to us with the signatures and put that on a ballot. I will say that the arena, for example, I think took about, what does it take? Like about 2 to 3 tries before that actually passed on the ballot. So if we kind of take what happens in Oklahoma City and then what happens here in Wichita, if the plan goes down, for example, if it actually doesn't pass a public vote, I'm sure people are going to be asking why, and then maybe coming back with another plan. What we want to do, though, is make sure that we do utilize our waterfront. Right now, we are losing tourism. We are losing conventions to places like Oklahoma, places like in Tulsa and Oklahoma City. And to be honest, we're going to be playing Tulsa, University of Tulsa this weekend. Yes. I don't like to lose to Tulsa.
Now, when you say we, you mean
Wichita State. Wichita State.
For those of you who aren't Shocker fans and don't go to the games,
that's right.
Yes.
And I'm a Wichita State grad. I'm a big basketball fan. I don't like losing to Tulsa for anything. And when I look at the demographics, we are actually losing to Tulsa when it comes to population growth, when it comes to job growth. And a big part of that is some of the stuff they're doing to their river in the downtown area. And I think we are in a pivotal moment where we can do something really great with our riverfront because the city owns it, and it really hasn't been developed to its potential. So it's going to be a conversation that isn't going to end in the next few months, even though it kind of feels like that, because I think that first phase of the conversation is ending where...
There's not necessarily finality at this point of the conversation.
Right. This is something we're going to be talking about for the next few years. I think the first vote we're going to have on it is to figure out how to implement phase one. What does phase one looks like? What do we want to? How do we want to pay for it? If it's sales tax vote, it has to actually go to a public vote.
Again, interesting dichotomy that you bring up, because even Overland Park, we compete with them on so many levels from what I think, and there's a bit of a dichotomy there because they compete with Kansas City, Missouri, and even the Kansas side.
Sorry, Craig, 1 second. My thing fell in my ear because it's my first time, but
no, that's fine. That's fine. We'll just roll with the 316-491-5787.
Right?
Yeah, we are live, so it's good to know. June, you are on the show. June, what is your question for the mayor? Thank you for holding.
Yes. Sometime back, I talked to Mr. Whipple then, or Congressman Whipple, about uninsured motorists and what can be done in the state of Kansas. And I just heard tonight that they're talking about it in the state, giving the temporary driver's licenses back to these people that have a suspended license because their insurance is didn't have insurance, and letting them get permits to drive so they can get to work to make money so they can pay off their tickets. And I think it sounds like a very good idea. And I just wonder what Wichita would do to try to encourage something like that, because right now I could probably name 10 people without even thinking about it. They're driving without driver's licenses.
Well, June, thank you for the call. Interesting question. I know Senator Aletha Fausto, who you know,
That's right.
has been pushing very hard and has brought something forward into the legislature this year right now. That is in the works. I don't know how far that's gotten, but what she wants to do is have people reinstated so they can drive, but they still have to prove that they're going to provide insurance, that they're going to be responsible. That they're going. But she also brought up that there are a lot of reasons why people don't have a license. One of those brought up a couple of months ago was a group that brought it to the city council and said, we've got a lot of unpaid parking tickets here. That's causing people to lose their license. Your thoughts on kind of her question, and then some of the other things about why people might lose their license
So,
too.
yeah, and the caller stated that some people might actually lose their license because they don't have insurance. Really, the bill and the goal of the legislature is more for people who, let's say you have traffic tickets or speeding tickets. Speeding tickets are quite a lot of money, over $200 if you get a speeding ticket. For someone who's making minimum wage, making $10 an hour, has a family, a lot of times that money is real money. It's not easy to just pay it. So they might miss their court date. They might miss their whatever the timeline is for them to get that paid, and then their license actually becomes suspended. Well, during that time, if you are someone who is feeding a family, if you're someone who has a job, here in Wichita, one of the things I campaign on is trying to improve our public transportation. Our public transportation doesn't go beyond 6 o'clock, so and it's not to a level as it is in other cities. So a lot of times you have people who have parking tickets, have a driver's license suspended because they have a speeding ticket. They still got to get to work. And they're taking that risk. They're driving on a suspended license, in which if they get pulled over again, then it just gets them kind of deeper into to this hole. I think the legislature's goal, and Senator Aletha Fausto's goal, is to make sure that you have incentive to pay off these tickets, but also you have the ability to pay off these tickets. Where if you have a bill that limits where you can go back and forth at least to work and make that money, that puts you in a better spot to pay your debt to society, which is allowing you to actually have, to pay off some of these tickets without losing your house, without losing your job, without having to make it so, you are less self-sufficient. So that's the goal of it. I'm not in the legislature anymore. My role here in Wichita, I think, is to also create that alternative, which is having us modify or modernize our public transportation, so that not only can you use public transportation in some of these instances, but also you might just choose to, where we want to get our public transportation to a point where it's nice out, and so I'll just walk to the bus stop and take the bus, because now we're moving over to electric buses. There was lots of reasons to take public transit, where I might just take the bus to work because it's a nice day out. So we want to make sure that we bring up our public transportation to that level too, so that people have other options. But right now in Wichita, if you're someone who has to go back and forth to work, but you had a bunch of parking tickets and your license is suspended, chances are you don't have many other options. And I think that the legislature is trying to address the reality of that.
Okay, we have a call, but before we get to that, thanks for holding, 316-491-5787. Let's get to a question that was brought to us on Facebook. This is also about Century 2. The question comes to us: has anyone suggested turning Century 2 into a film production studio? And I think that's an interesting question. Maybe we could do some films on Wichita. So, curious.
So, I think there's two parts to this question. One is, no, I haven't heard of any suggestions to turn it into a film production studio. But the other part of this question, where I think the caller or the Facebook poster is really hitting on, is the fact that we haven't had a real conversation about what would we do with Century 2 if the voters come out and say, hey, we want to keep it. Right now, I think someone posted on Facebook that Century 2 would make a nice aquarium, and then the news picked that up, but really no one has discussed that Century 2 that we should be shipping whales out here to be swimming around in Century 2. But
or dolphins. I think dolphins would be
or
a better
dolphins.
fit. Okay.
But but there are some real legitimate ideas out there of utilizing this structure and making it a community asset, particularly if we aren't going to utilize it anymore for the type of productions that it has been known for. If we get a state-of-the-art performing arts center, Century 2 is still a public space. Is there a use for it to be a place where we had other types of performing art, or is it going to be used, could we make it into a really cool aviation museum? Could we make it into, what else could we do with it? And I think that the former mayor and I have this in common, where when I was listening to him in his, towards his last couple of months, he mentioned at a meeting that, he wishes that we started studies on what would Century 2 look like if we were to hang on to it. So I think we had to start that conversation too as well.
Sounds like that might be a priority of yours.
Yeah, well, I want to look at all options on the table, and really my job isn't, as mayor, isn't to do what I think is best, but also to make sure that any decision that I make or the council makes comes from conversations with the community. So
we have one of those now. Diane, you're on the show. Diane, what is your question for the mayor?
Congratulations, Mayor. I wanted to ask, a year from now, when you look back on your first year of mayor, what are some of the things that you would like to achieve? And also, you speak about the Chung Report quite a bit. What are some of the elements of the Chung Report you would like to enact? Thank you.
So the good question. So my goals are actually, I have some technical ones, which is something like I think we can obtain pretty reasonable and concrete ethics reform, making sure that we are no longer one of the few cities of our size that don't have an ethics commission or strong ethics policy. That's something that we can start doing right away. And to be honest, if you walked in my office right now, you would see printouts of what other cities are doing with ethics that I'm utilizing to see if we can make those into a proposal for Wichita. Also, I want to stabilize our economy and make sure that we are growing and diversifying. If I look back in the Chung Report, it talks about this, where we are very much invested in the aviation sector. I think that we should be investing also in the tech sector. I think the future is technology, and one of the things that we can do in Wichita is to take advantage of what we do well. So innovation isn't becoming the next Austin; it's becoming the next Wichita, right? And you build on top of what you do well. Here we do STEM, we do technology actually really well, not just from a K through 12 perspective, but also at Wichita State University, you can get PhD level STEM doctorate degrees. So what I want to do is take the entrepreneurial spirit of Wichita, where everyone knows us as an entrepreneurial city, and have that be the vehicle where we can move forward with more technology innovation. And if we do that, we're putting products up into the cloud, which can put them in different economies, and we're bringing down really money for Wichita. And it's going to be what is our next sector. So I want to start taking those steps towards that as well.
Okay, I have a follow-up question attached to that, but let's get to Nicole right now, 316-491-5787. Nicole, thanks for holding. You're on the show. What is your question?
Well, thank you for taking my call, and I would, first of all, like to congratulate you on your ethics commission.
Thank you, Nicole. Well, we haven't got it passed yet, but we're working on it.
Well, it is tied into my question, because there were some ethics questions about my concerns about the water treatment plant project and the progress that you are endeavoring there in that.
Nicole, thank you for that question. I guess I'll start off with, where do we stand on finances? Very key piece to this is getting some kind of state and federal financing. Where are we with the financing right now?
So my understanding is we're still progressing forward towards getting the grant money that we're going to need from the federal government in order to finish this water project. I understand that we are still on target to have some savings for it, the project is actually moving forward without any concerns as far as the members of the council or the manager who are overlooking at the moment. I'm kind of coming in new to this. These were decisions that were made before I was elected, so I'm somewhat playing catch up. But from my understanding, things are moving forward as planned. One of the things we also have to do is think about once that plant is up and running, about staffing it, about taking advantage of some of the higher education programs we have, and trying to figure out, okay, can we utilize some of these programs to train people to go work for the water plant, and what does that look like? So Wichita is in a really good position for that because, as I said in the beginning, we have some incredible higher education institutions here to feed into our local economy, and they're quite nimble. If we have a change where, hey, we need this many people who can be trained to work at a brand new water plant, we can make those collaborative initiatives with members of our higher education community.
I know that the people in Public Works have trained folks quite well to kind of juggle the old water plant and keep it going. It's interesting to me that they have redundancies back there to back up with the old water treatment plant to keep the thing running. So something breaks, they know to bring it apart. So be an interesting concept there to train people and bring them in. I like that. 316-491-5787. That's the number. Call the Mayor of Wichita. Angie, you are on the show. What is your question?
Hi. First, congratulations
Thank
on
you.
the election. And we are part of a online neighborhood watch called Nextdoor. And there's been a lot of conversation lately regarding the speeding through the residential. And the kids are getting hit. The animals are getting hit and killed in front of their, in front of their owners. Are we in a place where we can maybe look at putting speed bumps in, or maybe putting the signs up that show what their speed is? I mean, something just that stands out that says, hey, we're watching and you need to watch your speed through these residential areas.
Interesting. Thank you for that call. A lot of studies have been done on this. A lot of studies have been done on if you put up the speed, this is your speed, it slows people down. What are your thoughts on her questions here?
So, as a dad, there's literally nothing that annoys me more than walking out. I have my kids who are playing with the bicycles, and by bicycles, they just got the little plastic, you can't see them on it, and then you got someone who's just whizzing past your house doing at least 30 or 40. It's enraging because you would just assume that in residential areas people would know to slow down. There is a few things we should be doing. The longest to achieve would be to go put in speed bumps, to figure out what these areas are and go put in speed bumps. That would probably take a study, that would take some budgeting. So a few things we can do is there are actually, as a member of my neighbor association, we would recommend people utilize these. There were pretty much these plastic, self-standing, I guess, they look like turtles, I guess. Anyways, they held up a plastic flag that said slow down, or residential area. So there are stuff that neighbors can actually do to remind people that they're in a residential area, and they look official. So you can, and they're cheap, they're about $20. But also make sure you go to your neighbor association meeting if you live in a neighbor a neighbor that's organized, because they'll have what's called a beat cop, and that's your community policing officer, and let them know that if there's vehicles that are speeding through, particularly if it's the same one over and over again, and they will make sure to put that on their list of places to patrol more of. So the goal is to make sure that property owners can go out and put something up to remind people to slow down, but also make sure that you alert your beat officer, and that data gets collected, and then later, if we find that there are areas that are more problematic than others, that's how we're able to make decisions when it comes to speed bumps or traffic lights or other signs.
I know the things the city has tried include literally putting in a temporary roundabout. It has plastic cones that they put out that are kind of semi-permanent, and they have a roundabout. They tried it on North Market. Oh, North Market, that's not right. Just north of downtown. I want to say Park Place. They've tried it. So I know that there's some data out there for that. So, all right, 316-491-5787. David, thank you for holding. We appreciate you. David, what is your question?
Well, I wanted to say I like the idea of the new electric buses, and I was wondering what new green projects that the mayor has involved. I would really like to see the city to develop a wind farm and a solar farm, and it would really help reduce our carbon print, and that's really what I was wondering.
Interesting question. Other cities have tried this. If you go to Windham, Minnesota, they've tried it. They have some interesting takeaways. What are your thoughts on green projects?
So green projects make a lot of sense. Like there's an economic benefit to it, but also there's a values benefit to it. Where it used to be the technology wasn't there. Now we do see the technology there, but also we have more options than we used to have. For example, some of us on our electric bills, you can actually request that you get wind energy, where you're just buying electricity from your from the company, but they will set aside enough energy that's being produced by wind for your particular house. So some of those type of programs is something we should be talking about as a city moving forward, where we buy electricity just like everyone else, but is there a way that we can utilize some of the opportunities that are already out there to have more of the energy or all the energy that comes in come from clean and renewable sources. Now that doesn't mean we have to go and build our own wind farm somewhere, because those who are out there delivering and developing electricity, they already are using wind farms and other renewable sources. So it's going to be, well, do we want a higher percentage of the energy coming in from Wichita to be from those sources? And if so, those conversations need to happen with Evergy or with the supplies of electricity.
I think a lot of people don't understand that energy is kind of a Kansas export. We ship it other places. It literally goes other places. So you can check. Interesting concept there. Let's get to another question now. 316-491-5787. Let's get to a Facebook question. We had another one of these. I'll get to my fourth and final one, but this one comes into us. What do you think about Governor Kelly's proposal to charge a tax on streaming services? So you got your phone out and you're streaming away and you're plugged into whatever app you want. And I noticed that was one of the legislative priorities for this year. What are your thoughts there?
So I want to make it clear. First of all, it's tough for me to disagree with the governor on television, but I'm going to. And the legislative agenda that the city proposed was talking about sales tax. Sales tax is different. So sales tax is if you go and you buy online a product from Walmart.com, you pay sales tax because we have a Walmart here in Kansas. If you buy from RiteAid.com, which is like an East Coast or Northeastern pharmacy, you pay zero sales tax here in Kansas, which means that we are actually incentivizing people to go outside of Kansas to buy their products, which means we're stimulating other economies.
So, for instance, we don't have a Netflix that exists in Kansas per se.
Right. So getting back to the caller's question, I just want to make sure that we understand the difference between the legislative agenda, which is putting businesses on the same playing field as Kansas businesses when it comes to buying stuff online. Now, if you want to tax streaming services, that's different. To me, that feels like a tax on people who are trying to save money. To be honest, it would be something I wouldn't support in the legislature because the type of people who are cutting the cord and like my family, for instance, we have an antenna, we have Netflix, I think we have HBO streaming for Game of Thrones. We're trying to save money, and if you want to add a tax onto the streaming services, it's really just. It doesn't give the same justification as trying to level the playing field for Kansas small businesses who are selling products. Where one of them makes sense because we don't want to make it more expensive to shop in Kansas, so we're incentivizing people to put their money in Kansas instead of incentivizing them to buy stuff online. I don't see a justification personally for taxing streaming services. So at this point, I think that's dead in the legislature from my perspective, which I'm not in the legislature right now. So just from what I see, I doubt it's going to move forward. But it's something that I don't think that as a city we should be pursuing at this time.
Well, I'm glad to hear your antenna TV. I'll ask, how good does PBS come in?
It's pretty good, actually. Okay. It's pretty much all my kids watch.
Good. Well, you've got young kids, of course. Good for you. Of course. Good for you. All right, LD, we appreciate you holding. LD, you are on.
And LD, I messed up my ear thing again. So
wait. Okay. Let me see. Go ahead, LD. What's your question?
Yes. Good evening. I'm inquiring about the. Sorry.
You're okay.
The relocation of the RAD Wichita Rental Assistance Demonstration Project. It keeps being delayed. I understand that Sally Strong, Rosetta Brown, and with the RH Brown and Company, is continuing the interviews and assessments. But what is happening? What is the delay about?
Which delay? I'm sorry, I missed that first part.
What, sir?
I'm sorry, which project is being delayed? I apologize.
The RAD relocation, Wichita Rental Assistance Demonstration Project.
Did you fill me in, Craig?
Somewhat, yes. I know that things have been shuffled there, and I don't know if that's slowing the process for rental and relocation.
Oh, okay.
I would encourage you to, she didn't say where she was from, did she?
I don't know.
Get a hold of your city council member and ask the question, where do I go next, or who do I contact to make sure that I can stay plugged in with some changes that are happening right now. I think that's your first step. Your second step would just be to call City Hall as well. So I hope we offered you some help with that. Definitely get a hold of your council person, ask that question, and also call City Hall and ask that question too as well. I believe they can guide you in the right direction if you call council chambers. I'm sure that either James Clendenin or Cindy Claycomb, well, or Jeff Lubaugh, either one of those could probably get you pointed in the right direction there. So 316-491-5787, that is the number to call. And we have Jim. We appreciate you holding. Jim, what is your question?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Hey, Jim.
I've never seen the amount of murders and shootings going on in the city of Wichita, and I've lived here all my life. There's gunfire every 2 to 3 weeks near my home. There was a girl killed on 2nd and West Street not too long ago. Seems like that ought to be a priority on your list.
Jim, appreciate the question. I know Wichita PD has brought this up. They're going to have another seminar coming up on this with the officers. I know they continue to work on this. It's something I've studied quite a bit, and I do know that back in the 90s we had still some higher numbers. Some of those were, well, that was heavily gang related, but your thoughts to the point of his question.
So a couple things where, first of all, it's one of my top priorities. However, that conversation happens towards the budget discussions, which are a couple months down the road. So right now, I meet with the chief of police every week. I meet with the head of the firefighters union every week, and the chief of firefighters every week as well, to figure out really what do you guys need to reach the goals you set. One of the things when it comes to community policing in Wichita is we have less officers than other cities our size, and by supporting our officers and getting more officers out there, that allows us to build better relationships in communities. And through those relationships, that's when people start by trusting the police officers that are in the communities, letting them know about, if there's some crime that is just beginning, where let's say there's an abandoned house that everyone in that neighborhood knows, no one lives there, but now there's cars going back and forth. If we have really good community policing, then some of the neighbors will feel comfortable talking to the police about that. They'll keep an extra eye on it and be able to stop that crime before it becomes something bigger. So to implement those policies, we're going to need not only to make sure that our police and our firefighters have a seat at the table and tell us, hey, what is it that you need? And not just look at them as figures on a spreadsheet, but also it's going to cost more money. We need to bring that into the policy discussions to say, how much more money are we going to need for training budgets to make sure that we are not only getting more police officers, but retaining them. Are we losing police officers to other states? And if so, why is that? Are we not as competitive? So those are the conversations that will be happening when we start talking about the budget, and hopefully that we'll get transparency, we'll get some of this other stuff out of the way before then, because I believe the budget talks are as we're going into the summer.
And I know you're already plugged into the chief, and he will tell you numbers-wise, we're still about 150 below Tulsa, perhaps 200, depending on how you look at the numbers for who's involved with what compared to like an Overland Park. So interesting. 316-491-5787, that is our number, but we're about out of time. Let's take another caller. Cynthia, thank you for holding. Cynthia, you are on the show. What's your question?
I have been told that they are looking at expanding the South Central Police Station at Pawnee and Broadway. And if you're familiar with that area, Herman Hill Park is already crowded, and it would take more space away from the park area where they do the Frisbee golf. But we have a school right down the street, Longwood Elementary, is empty, and they have been using it for police tactical training, but it was for sale recently. Why wouldn't the city consider buying a property that's already standing rather than building another one or trying to expand where they are there at the corner of Pawnee and Broadway, which is not really feasible, it doesn't look like. Just thought I would run that by you and see what you thought of it, or would want to check into it.
Well, when I talked to the police chief, there are some areas, particularly down in South Broadway, that they want to put more attention on. As someone who is a South-Sider myself, I can tell you that there are some areas that, with an increased police presence, we can address some of the crimes that happen and make sure that those crimes don't lead to bigger or worse crimes. As far as your question about reutilizing or selling a building that the city owns opposed to expanding on another building, usually these wind up becoming pretty interesting or intricate policy discussions. So we might have, for example, a building that it looks great on the outside, but when you go on the inside, there's it doesn't meet code or standards. For example, we have some buildings where the paint that they use is lead paint, or it has asbestos in it, or it's just bringing it up to a modern standard would take just as much or as much money as buying a new building. I'm not saying that's what happened in the example you gave. To be honest, that sounds like a decision that was made before the last, I'm going on my third week right now, so before when I was sworn in. But usually with those conversations, when we get in particularly these older buildings, these older government buildings, we find that they are a little more hazardous and harder to repurpose than, let's say, like an old house would be. So I'm sure that was the discussion. I wish I had a more specific answer for you, but that's a project that happened before I got sworn in.
And indeed, I can tell you that was part of the case. And I know that Police Chief Gordon Ramsay has really dedicated to not only South but North Broadway corridor. I mean, they pulled out, I believe it was 140 pounds of heroin last year. Wow. That's just from the Special Investigations Bureau alone with Captain Jeff Allen. They pulled out the same amount of weed. They found cocaine and just thousands of pills. So I know that they're focusing on the Broadway corridor. They're really trying to extend that out. So I hope that answered your question. It was a very thorough answer. I appreciate that.
Oh, of course.
Well, we have a minute and 7 seconds left in the show. First of all, I wanted to say welcome to the show. Glad that you're here, and I think you've done a great job with this. So appreciate you being here, answering questions. We'll of course be back next month as well. So I really appreciate you being here.
I really appreciate the questions. If you guys have a question moving forward, feel free to reach out to me on social media. My cell number is on my website. You can call the office and they'll transfer you in. My goal is to be as accessible as possible to people in our community, because the mayor of Wichita shouldn't be a desk job. It should be an active job. So I want to get out there and talk with people. If there's an event that anyone needs me at, just let me know. Love to attend if I can make it.
Great. Good to hear you're accessible and putting your cell phone out there. Good for you.
Well,
all right,
for better or worse, right?
For better or worse, exactly. All right, coming up next, B29 Doc, History Restored. This is a really cool program. You're going to want to watch that one. I know I've got my TiVo set, so I'm going to be on the way home. So thank you for being here. I do appreciate you coming. That's our time. We'll see you again next time. Have a good one.